What's up, everyone? It's your boy, Johnny the 5'8" here, and today we're going to be talking about WWE versus TKO. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be comparing WWE under Vince McMahon versus WWE under TKO. Business under Vince McMahon. Let's start with the business side of WWE under Vince McMahon. One thing many fans appreciated was that ticket prices were generally more affordable than they are today. Vince seemed to put a greater emphasis on making sure everyday fans could attend live events without spending as much money. WWE did tour internationally under Vince, but major premium live events were much less common outside North America. His focus was primarily on the United States and Canada, where WWE built most of his business. As far as partnerships go, Vince rarely worked with other wrestling companies. His focus was almost entirely on WWE and building his own brand, rather than collaborating with outside promotion. Sponsorships still existed during Vince's era, but they generally felt more subtle. They weren't consistently in the spotlight, and the shows felt less commercialized. Product placement was present, but it usually wasn't as noticeable as integrated into the product as it is today. Business under TKO. When it comes to the business side under TKO, one of the biggest talking points is ticket prices. Ticket prices across WWE shows have risen significantly, and it's not just wrestling issue. You see the same trend in other major sports too, like NBA, UFC, and even concerts and live entertainment in general. For a lot of fans, especially working class families, attending live events feels a lot less accessible than it used to be. What used to be a special night out has started to feel like a major financial decision. In some cases, it can feel like you seriously have to budget around it just to afford tickets and sometimes travel. Now, it's important to be fair here. This is not only a TKO problem. Inflation, rising operating cost, venue pricing, and the overall economy all play a role in why live events cost more today than they did years ago. That said, under TKO, WWE is also operating more aggressively as a major entertainment business and a publicly traded asset, which naturally puts more focus on maximizing revenue. That can make things feel more commercialized or expensive from a fan perspective. So it's really a mix of factors: broader economic changes, industry-wide pricing increases, and business decisions aimed at a higher profitability. But for fans, the end result is the same. Going to a live show often feels much harder on the wallet than it used to. Creative decisions under Vince McMahon. When it came to creative, Vince McMahon was the final decision maker for most of WWE history. While he had a creative team, the biggest storylines and major decisions usually had to be approved by Vince himself. Vince's creative record had plenty of hits and plenty of misses. I would argue he had more than the current TKO era, but that is also because Vince was much more willing to take creative risks. Sometimes through those risks completely failed, but other times they created some of the most memorable moments in wrestling history. Under Vince, WWE produced legendary rivals and characters. The rivalry between The Rock and Stone Cold helped define the Attitude Era. Vince's own on-screen character as the evil boss feuding with Stone Cold became one of the greatest storylines in wrestling history. Even when Vince had bad ideas, you can often feel the passion and creativity behind them. He was not afraid to try something unusual and over the top if he thought it would entertain audiences. That is one of the biggest differences I see with Vince's WWE. There's a sense of whimsy and unpredictability. You never knew what crazy idea might happen next, and sometimes those risks created unforgettable moments that fans still talk about decades later. Creative decisions under TKO. When it comes to creative decisions under TKO, I can't speak for everyone because this is subjective. But a lot of hardcore fans, including myself, feel like WWE is falling into the old trap. When you try to appeal to everyone, you end up truly appealing to no one. One of the biggest criticisms is that WWE today sometimes feels it lacks a strong identity. Back in Vince McMahon's era, even when people disagree with the product, it still felt like WWE had a clear personality and direction. There was a certain edge and unpredictability in that anything could happen, and sometimes it did. Under TKO, the approach can feel more cautious in trying to appeal to a wider global audience and avoid alienating casual viewers from the product. Sometimes plays things very safe. Instead of taking big creative risks, it can lead to more predictable and conventional storytelling. For some fans, especially more casual viewers, this consistency is a positive. But for hardcore fans, it can make storylines feel flat or less engaging. There's less shock value, less risk-taking, and fewer moments that truly feel unique or unpredictable. The end result, at least in my opinion, is that some storylines can come across as bland or uninspiring. Not necessarily bad, but safe. Safe does not create the most memorable moments in wrestling. Match quality under Vince McMahon. When it comes to match quality, I think WWE Vince McMahon was consistently good. While not every match was classic, the big pay-per-view matches usually delivered one thing I liked about Vince WWE was that the matches often felt more intense. They felt like actual fights instead of perfectly choreographed performances. Of course, every wrestling match is planned to some degree, but under Vince, the action often looked more physical and emotional, and less like wrestlers were simply going spot to spot. The best matches told a story. The moves mattered. The rivalries added emotion. You could feel the wrestlers were trying to win a fight rather than just put on an athletic exhibition. I think one of the strengths of Vince McMahon's WWE was the in-ring action. It was not just about impressive moves. It was about making the audience believe in the rivalry and getting emotionally invested in the outcome. Match quality under TKO. Matches are generally given more time to breathe compared to some past eras, which allows for longer sequences, more pacing, more athletic showcases. However, one criticism from some fans is that matches can sometimes feel overly choreographed instead of feeling like a fight or chaotic brawl. Certain moments can come across more like a rehearsed sequence or performance. For example, in some matches when a move is botched, there are cases where wrestlers immediately attempt the same moves again. Older school wrestling psychology veterans would often criticize that approach. The idea was that if something did not work, you would adapt on the spot, change direction, and improvise, and work your way back to that moment later. That style helped maintain the illusion that the match is a real struggle rather than a planned routine. Wrestling is, of course, always choreographed to some degree, but when it becomes too visibly structured, it can break immersion and make the match feel like a fight, make the match feel less like a fight and more like a dance performance. Some former wrestlers and creators, including Maven Huffman, have made similar observations about the modern wrestling presentation. That the balance between athleticism and realism is delicate and easy to tip too far in one direction. At its best, wrestling should feel like controlled chaos. This concern of some fans is that modern matches sometimes lean too far towards control at the expense of the chaotic fight feel the older eras emphasize. WWE under Vince McMahon roster usage. When it came to roster usage, Vince McMahon definitely had his favorites. There were certain superstars he trusted to be in the main event scene, and they often stay there for long periods of time. At the same time, Vince was not afraid to push new talent if he believed they had what it took. Wrestling, match quality, mic skills, charisma, work ethic, and fan reaction all play a role in whether they moved up the card or fell down it. If you consistently had great matches, connected with the audience, and put in the work, you had a real chance of getting a bigger opportunity. Whether it was generating incredible heel heat or getting some of the loudest crowd reaction as a face. Vince paid attention to stars who can make fans feel something. While not every booking decision was popular, Vince was always looking for the next major attraction. If the fans truly get behind someone and the superstar proved they could perform at a high level, Vince was willing to elevate them into a bigger role. WWE under TKO production. From a pure production standpoint, WWE under TKO still looks very similar in a lot of ways. The big stages for PLEs, as well as the overall construction of Raw and SmackDown, still maintain that large-scale stadium level of presentation WWE has always been known for. The camera work, lighting, and general presentation style has not changed drastically either, and it still feels like a modern, polished sports entertainment product. The biggest difference, however, is the level of advertising and sponsorship integration. There are noticeably more ads embedded directly into the show itself. This includes logos on the ring and branded weapons or props, and heavy sponsorship presence during the broadcast. You can also see more frequent commercial breaks and sponsor segments throughout the show. For some fans, this level of advertising can feel overwhelming. It can break immersion and make the product feel like a moving advertisement than a wrestling show at times. This concern is not necessarily sponsorship itself, since that has always existed in WWE, but the visibility and intensity of it. When branding becomes too constant, it risks distracting from what's happening in the ring, which is ultimately what most fans are there to see. It's one of the most notable shifts in the modern WWE presentation, whether you like it or not. It often comes to how much commercial integration you are willing to accept in the product. Production under Vince McMahon. From a production standpoint, WWE Vince McMahon stayed relatively consistent for a long time in terms of camera work. They matched presentation, used multiple camera angles, close-ups, and classic hard cam framing to emphasize impact moments in the ring. Stage design also did not feel drastically different than what you see today. WWE has always focused on large interchangeable stages, LED boards, and strong visual presentation. So in the sense of the overall look of the product remained familiar across eras. A major difference I noticed, though, is sponsorship under Vince. The ring canvas, barricades, and ringside area were generally kept clean. They were not constant logos plastered everywhere. You did not have things like fast food or brand logos heavily integrated in the match environment. I think the reason for that is simple. Vince McMahon wanted audience's attention focused on the wrestling itself. The ring felt more like a controlled space for storytelling and physical performance rather than a moving advertising board. Because of that, matches often felt more immersive. There were fewer visual distractions pulling your attention away from what was happening in the ring, which helped keep the focus on the action and the emotion of the moment. Roster usage for TKO. When it comes to roster usage under TKO, I think things are fairly solid in the mid-card. There's a decent amount of talent getting TV time, and you see more wrestlers being featured across Raw and SmackDown compared to some past periods. However, in the main event scene, things can start to feel repetitive. A lot of the top level storylines tend to circle back to established feuds or characters that have already been heavily featured, instead of constantly elevating new names into the main event picture. WWE often leads towards what they know already works. It's a safer approach. It can also make the top of the card feel predictable over time. Because of that, main event scene can sometimes feel like it's rotating between the same 5 to 7 names rather than regularly refreshing with new challengers who are being regularly refreshing with new challengers who are being built up and given a real chance to break through. Even champions can fall into that circle. For example, Cody Rhodes' title reign and multiple championships is starting to feel repetitive to some fans. Not necessarily because of his performance, but because of the challengers and story directions around him can feel familiar or recycled. The result of a roster that feels active through with a main event scene that some fans feel could benefit from more risk-taking and fresh matchups at the top of the card. Fan reception under Vince McMahon. When looking at fan reception under Vince McMahon versus TKO. When looking at fan reception under Vince McMahon, it's fair to say it was a mixed bag overall. At its best, fans were heavily invested. People enjoyed the chaos and intensity and unpredictability that WWE could deliver. Vince's era produced a lot of memorable moments, larger-than-life characters and storylines that fans still talk about today. There was a real sense that anything could happen, and that helped create strong emotions, reactions from the audience. However, there are clear lows. Some storylines missed the mark completely. Certain creative decisions were heavily criticized, and not every direction resonated with fans. So overall, fan reception under Vince can be described as a balance of very high highs and low lows. Under TKO, the fan reception feels different. Common criticisms from some fans is that the product can feel more consistent but less exciting. Instead of big swings in quality, both great and terrible, the show can sometimes feel safer and more controlled. For those fans, that leads to a feeling of things being fine but not necessarily much watch or emotionally memorable. To be fair, not everyone agrees with that perspective. Many fans appreciate the current era for its polished stability and in-ring consistency. But for some longtime viewers, the product does not always leave a strong, lasting impression in the same way. To put it simply, Vince's WWE felt like a roller coaster. Sometimes it was amazing, and sometimes it crashed hard, but it was rarely forgettable. TKO era WWE, on the other hand, is seen by some fans as more steady but less emotionally extreme. In the end, it comes down to preference. Some fans prefer unpredictable highs and lows, while others prefer a more controlled, consistent product. In conclusion, WWE under TKO is like drinking tap water. It will hydrate you, but it's not something you are going to think about or remember for the rest of the day. Thank you all for watching this video, man. It was a long one. This was like kind of a deep dive type video, I guess. But if you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Thank you all for watching, and peace.